Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visits to Paris and then to Washington sent out distinctly separate but equally significant messages on what India's worldview is this week. We're going to get you the top takeaways and break down some of the Trump talk we heard on a wide range of issues. Hello and welcome to Worldview at the Hindu with me, Suhasini, Haidar. Now, it was a busy week for the Prime Minister, but we're going to start at the end, backwards, with his visit to Washington first, and particularly his meeting with US President Donald Trump. Modi's DC visit came, remember, less than a month since Trump was actually sworn in. He's only the fourth world leader to get a bilateral visit. This is after Israel, Japan, and Jordan. Arguably, those aren't the world's most powerful countries, but the sequencing and the highlighting of India is significant. Modi and Trump met at the White House, and then what seemed to be a first, Prime Minister Modi also took many questions from journalists both before and after their meetings. We'll get you some of the highlights of those, but listen in to what both leaders said.
There is truly a special bond between the United States and India, and the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy. And today, the Prime Minister and I are announcing a framework to strengthen those ties even further economically.
फ्रेंड्स, अमेरिका के लोग राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप के मोटो मेक अमेरिका ग्रेट अगेन यानी मागा से परिचित है। भारत के लोग भी विरासत और विकास की पटरी पर विकसित भारत 2047 के दृढ़ संकल्प को लेकर तेज गति शक्ति से विकास की ओर अग्रसर है। अमेरिका की भाषा में कहूं तो विकसित भारत का मतलब मेक इंडिया ग्रेट अगेन यानी मिगा। जब अमेरिका और भारत साथ मिलकर काम करते हैं यानी मागा, मागा प्लस मीगा, तब बन जाता है मेगा पार्टनरशिप फॉर प्रॉस्पेरिटी।
A lot of acronyms coming up, so this is an acronym alert on Worldview as well. But let's get you the top 5 takeaways for India-US ties that came off those talks. And remember, this is just the beginning of the Trump administration, so we can see where the priorities lie. The first is trade. Modi didn't get the best welcome in sorts because just before the meeting, Trump announced reciprocal tariffs on all countries, including India. Listen in.
As we deepen our defense partnership, will also strengthen our economic ties and bring greater fairness and reciprocity to our trading relationship. As a signal of good faith, Prime Minister Modi recently announced the reductions to India's unfair, very strong tariffs that limit U.S. access into the Indian market very strongly. And really, it's a big problem, I must say.
So some tough talking there, but India clearly took it on the chin. The government has already compromised, cut down tariffs on many goods, especially motorbikes, Mr. Trump is fond of speaking about. Then India and US announced a new partnership called Compact, catalyzing opportunities for military partnership, accelerated commerce and technology for the 21st century. I told you. This is expected really to set down in clear terms what each side is getting and giving to the other, a balance sheet of sorts. I don't think we've seen something like this before, but it's called Compact. We'll hear more about it later this year. There's also Mission 500. This aims to more than double total bilateral trade between the two countries to $500 billion by 2030. Then there is the first phase of a bilateral trade agreement. Remember, they were trying to discuss an FTA during Trump's first tenure. That didn't work out. But now they want the first phase of the BTA to be out by 2025. The two sides also plan to convene meetings of the trading routes like IMEC and I2U2. Both were suspended due to the Gaza conflict. Mr. Trump, not referring to IMEC directly, but talked about a trade route from India to Israel to Italy to the United States. The second big takeaway really is on defense and strategic ties. No surprise there. Trump will visit India later this year for the Quad Summit. The grouping is already going to get busy conducting joint humanitarian airlift exercises for the first time. There's a 10-year India-US defense partnership agreement which will be signed this year, probably when Trump visits. There's the Autonomous Systems Industry Alliance, or Asia as it's called. That's for industry partnerships and production, but for the Indo-Pacific in particular. India will also buy Javelin missiles, Stryker vehicles, more P-8I aircraft from the US, they announced, and Trump said that the US plans to sell India F-35 fighter aircraft. Although listen in to Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, he kind of dampened the speed on that deal just a little bit. Listen in.
I don't think with regard to the acquisition of an advanced aviation platform by India, that process has started as yet. So this is currently something that's at the stage of a proposal, but I don't think the formal process in this regard has started.
So the third big takeaway was on energy, and Trump has said that he aims to make the United States India's #1 supply of oil and gas. Remember his drill baby drill promise. Presently, the US accounts for 1% of India's oil imports, and that's behind Russia, behind Iraq, behind Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and now Angola. After India's decision to water down and amend probably its nuclear liability law, the US has said it's keen to start nuclear energy plants in India finally, so many years later. In particular, India and the US also said they would like to develop SMRs, or small modular reactors, the new part of the nuclear reactor technology. The fourth big takeaway really on technology itself. To begin with, there's the launch of what's called trust. Transforming the relationship utilizing strategic technology. This is on artificial intelligence, quantum computing, semiconductors, but it isn't something new. It's basically trust will simply replace another acronym, ISET, which was meant as the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies. It was announced between the Biden administration and the Modi government then. One of the big questions left unanswered is the future of the GE F414 jet engines tech transfer deal, the biggest of its kind. This hasn't been mentioned, but officials say it's still very much on track. There's also a US-India roadmap on accelerating AI infrastructure by the end of the year, and an Indus innovation platform that's been launched for businesses on AI and startups, really. No announcement was made on visas for skilled professionals like H-1Bs, and really no let-up on the return, or the planned return by Mr. Trump of hundreds and eventually thousands of illegal Indian migrants back to India. The fifth big takeaway was on terrorism, as Trump announced that the US has cleared the extradition of Tahabur Hussain Rana. He was responsible for making the travel arrangements and logistics with David Headley for the 26/11 attacks, according to investigators. Now, India was able to question Headley, but the US never agreed to his extradition, so this will be a big deal when it happens. The joint statement between them also mentioned strengthening cooperation on counter-terrorism, especially from cross-border and Islamist terror groups, including the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It also called on Pakistan to conclude the trials in the 26/11 and the Pathankot attack cases. So some progress over there as well. But amidst that bonhomie, and clearly it was the leaders saying they were so happy to meet each other again, there were some areas where Modi and Trump didn't seem to be on the same page. So let's just take you through those. On Bangladesh, there was this moment where Trump tossed the question on foreign involvement in the upheaval in Bangladesh to Modi. Modi sidestepped the question. Misri later said that Modi had discussed India's concerns about the situation in Bangladesh with Trump. Then on Ukraine, Trump didn't actually acknowledge a role for India when he was specifically asked about it, as the Biden administration had consistently said. Instead, he spoke about bringing Russia and Ukraine to the table himself soon. On countering China, another specific question, Trump said he had no interest in beating anybody, and even offered actually to mediate between India and China, which is of course something India has rejected directly after. Now, prior to the meeting, Trump also took a swipe at the BRICS grouping that India is a founder member of, saying, quote unquote, BRICS is dead, and that he would levy 100% taxes on the grouping if it tries to sidestep the dollar, as he has threatened before. And then there was this question that Prime Minister Modi was asked directly about whether he had raised the case, the indictment against businessman Gautam Adani with Trump. And he gave a visibly angry reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I ask whether you discussed at all today the case of Gautam Adani, who's one of the wealthiest men in Asia and perceived as an ally of Prime Minister Modi? Prime Minister Modi, have you asked the President to take action on that case? Thank you.
पहली बात है, भारत एक लोकतांत्रिक देश है और हमारे संस्कार, हमारी संस्कृति वसुधैव कुटुंबकम की है। हम पूरे विश्व को अपना एक परिवार मानते हैं। हर भारतीय को मैं अपना मानता हूं। दूसरी बात है, ऐसे व्यक्तिगत मामलों के लिए दो देश के मुखिया न मिलते हैं, न बैठते हैं, न बात करते हैं।
All right. Well, there were no such awkward notes as Prime Minister Modi visited France earlier in the week. However, the two leaders, Macron and Modi, pitched their partnership for global transformation. And here were the big takeaways, really. The first, that India and France will cooperate on AI technology, also on protecting themselves from the dangers of AI. And there was a whole conference that they co-chaired. India and France signed a letter of intent on a partnership for nuclear SMR, small modular reactors. So they're ahead of that announcement from the US as well. Macron and Modi inaugurated a new consulate for India in Marseille. India and France also agreed to take IMEC forward. And a new R&D, research and development agreement between France's DGA agency and DRDO, along with talks on India's purchase of missiles, planes, submarines, and now a possible French purchase of Indian rocket launcher systems, or Pinaka as they're called, were all announced during that visit. So you can see the difference really on where the India-France comfort levels are at present, and with the new US president taking over and all the announcements he's made, the slightly less comfort zone for India at present. But what's Worldview's take? India and the US certainly have a strong relationship with a steadily improving trajectory. A leader like Donald Trump can, however, accelerate the partnership, but also derail it with his shifting priorities and changing stance, particularly on global issues. India will not be affected just by Trump's tariffs or by his transactional talking, but by the US's overall retrenchment from multilateralism. And New Delhi will need to learn to push back, to assert itself and shore up its position, also by seeking relations with other powers in the world, like France, of course, but also global South players, Russia, and a number of others. I do have some Worldview reading recommendations for you, and thank you so much each week for sending in what you think are good ideas as well. There's the Trump tapes by Bob Woodward. If you want a quick refresh of what Trump 1.0 was like, this is all the interviews by journalist Bob Woodward of Trump. Then there's The Power of Nuclear, The Rise, Fall, and Return of Our Mightiest Energy Resource by Marco Vischer. This is really a very comprehensive book on nuclear energy and where it's at. India's Trade Policy, the 1990s and Beyond, Arvind Panagriya, on why India's trade policy really needs to change. India's Moment, Changing Power Equations Around the World by former diplomat Mohan Kumar. And I've spoken about this book before, but it's important to read it again with the look at the trade chapters particularly. There's Chip War, The Fight for the World's Most Critical Technology by Chris Miller. And there's this book that I've only just read, but it came out a couple of years ago, called The World, A Brief Introduction by Richard Haas. I certainly hope you enjoy reading all of these, and later we will have some recommendations on books on artificial intelligence as well, but that's all we have time for here on Worldview. From the team, thanks for watching.